I'm JR. Right now, you are in the presence of the ultimate Bitcoin maximalist, the master of Bitcoin price prediction, and your international sensation, Tone Bates. Welcome. Known this guy for 20 years. We go back in college. Good friend I have. We are gracious host Nick. Appreciate it. We're about to begin.
All right.
Take it away.
Thanks, Jay. All right, guys. That was fun. Yeah, Nick and Blokforge team, thank you so much for hosting tonight's meetup. It's great. Most of you here know who I am. And it's going to be a little bit different than our normal meetups. Usually I do some kind of a presentation, and really hope the audio is good. So people in the live chat, let us know that the audio is streaming fine. But we're going to have a little conversation to kick this off. We happen to get somebody from the mining space online. Oh, I think we just lost them, unfortunately. I'm not sure what happened. We're just about, audio sounds good. Thanks, guys. Oh, I think I lost him. And I think I'm pronouncing that right. But it looks like we unfortunately lost them. Maybe we can get them back. And we're going to have a little conversation about mining and what is the latest mining. Oh, we got Steve back. Let me unmute and oh, 1 second. We got him. Hey, Steve.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, everybody can hear you. The people in the room can't see you, but the live stream audience can. And Steve, thank you for joining us. We are at Blokforge, and they sell all kinds of mining equipment, including your mining equipment from Canaan. So it's really great to have you on, and you can help my audience and everyone here understand a little more about mining. You have a few minutes for us, and we can have a little fireside chat.
Yeah, hopefully the VPN holds up. I'm here in Beijing, so comes in, goes out.
All right. Well, we're gonna jump right into it. Very briefly, tell us about yourself and your company, Canaan, or pronounce it correctly for me.
Pardon me?
Am I pronouncing it right?
We say Canaan.
Canaan.
Some people say Canaan. Our feelings aren't hurt. However you pronounce it.
All right. So tell us about Canaan. Tell us how you got started and how things are going now.
Long story. Back in 2007, 2009, I worked in open source mobile phones, and I had a kid working for me named Sheng Fu. And in 2016, he called me up and said, "Hey, Uncle, I need some help in sales and marketing and strategy." And he's a founder of Canaan. So, a big turnaround. So I went to work for him, consulting in sales and marketing. And then 2017, started to commute to Beijing. 2018, I moved to Seoul. And so I commute back and forth between Beijing and Seoul, doing sales and marketing, global, the international sales. We have 2 sales offices. One is domestic, handles inside China sales. And then I'm the global team, so I handle everything outside China.
Gotcha. And so the miners that you guys sell, they're Avalon miners.
Yeah, so Avalon was the first ASIC miner back in 2013. Before that, the founders did the Icarus board, FPGA boards. So we've been Bitcoin maximalists since the very beginning. We only do Bitcoin. We only care about Bitcoin. I'm a maximalist. So I focus on Bitcoin. I think it's it's obviously the most secure technology, the most robust technology. And I just think I believe in focus and perseverance. So I don't get distracted by other coins or stuff like that. I just stay focused on building Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, and that's great, and that's why I run one of your miners in my house and not a Bitmain miner. And we're about to get to Bitmain. And what did you think when you were hearing the latest news in Bitmain letting go so many staff and their IPO is having a lot of issues? And our view is on our channel, Bitmain made three crucial mistakes. One of them was that they started spending all of this money on research and development of other altcoins and developing ASICs for other coins that we know aren't viable. They had a whole investment division where they invested in companies. Not only did they invest in companies, they also invested in altcoins like Bcash. And ultimately, I believe that is going to destroy their company. What are your general thoughts on Bitmain and what do you think is going on?
Okay, so when I first started at Canaan and advised them on strategy, it looked like doing other coins was a good diversification. So in 2017, I was actually going to do an F miner based on GPUs. But then I realized that the coins are basically correlated. So it's not a good diversification strategy. It's just you're afraid to pick the winner strategy. So I canceled that GPU miner. And my thought was, if you have excess dollars, you should spend them on Bitcoin. You should spend them on making Bitcoin more successful, rather than diversifying into other altcoins. At one point, we tried to diversify into mining. After looking at that, we closed that down in Sweden. We did some blockchain investments. Again, the same thing was that what looked like a diversification strategy really wasn't a diversification strategy. It was like picking a different market segment that basically had lower margins and different kind of cash flows. So, on the surface, my first reaction was, oh, Bitmain has the right approach. But after spending a few months with it, I went, wait a minute, I either believe in Bitcoin or not. And I either focus all my resources and capital on Bitcoin and building Bitcoin miners or not. And so the only true diversification would be something like we do in building AI chips, where it's a different market segment, different customers, different growth path. So that was my feeling. I went through my 3-month, let's do business like Bitmain. And then it became really clear to me, the correlation was so strong between Bitcoin and the shit coins that what we don't, it's not a hedge. Okay, that's the way I looked at it.
Gotcha. All right. So here's another question. You may not be able to tell us many details. Bitmain's been trying to go IPO, and there's also lots of news articles saying that you guys have also been trying to go IPO. What market are you guys trying to go IPO on? The Hong Kong market as well, or what exchange are you looking to IPO on?
Well, we had a IPO in Hong Kong, and then Bitmain followed us there. It doesn't look like the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is going to be friendly to cryptocurrency IPOs. There are news reports that we are looking at the U.S. IPO, New York IPO. We keep looking for that, for the right opportunity. And I don't think we've made any decision yet. The immediate concern I think everyone has in the business, and that Bitmain would have, is, getting through this tough period. There was a confluence of circumstances that led to, like an enormous amount of machines being built. That started in late 2017, where the demand for machines went sky high. There was no supply. Prices started to go up dramatically. And then TSMC opened the floodgates, the late Q4 2017, early 2018. And so you had all this pent up demand from the mining companies who went out and built product like crazy. And that pig is still in the python, I put it, like the system is still digesting, what was built. So, I think most of the rumors about them are true. I know that they've laid off a ton of staff. Basically in the good times, you build up people, like I went through the .com bubble, and you really built up people ahead of the real need for them. You saw this forward demand, and you did your forecast, and you said, wow, if 2018 is going to be this huge, we're going to 100,000, then you start getting bodies. And we did the same thing in the internet bubble, where people are hired without any real, job for them to do. And then when the bubble bursts, then you have to lay them off. So Bitmain's going through that process. I don't have any detailed information on their financials, but it can't be good. So I wouldn't anticipate them going public in Hong Kong. It's a pretty brutal process in terms of auditing and everything they want to see. And it's just a little bit different from the ways business is done, let's say in the U.S. and different parts of the world. So I would give it their IPO like a 5% chance.
Wow.
And the like the business profile has got to look like horrible, based on what forecasts were, back in early 2018, when everyone's looking at going out, and the crush of the price in Bitcoin, and to some extent, when you build miners, you are going longer Bitcoin than anyone else in the world. When you build a Bitcoin ASIC, nobody else is longer Bitcoin than people who build Bitcoin ASICs. Nobody. Because when we build an ASIC, we pay up front, and we don't get a machine for 90 days. So, if you bought your Bitcoin and you wanted to get out after 30 days, you could get out. Well, if you're building Bitcoin ASICs, you can't get out. You are committed. Hard capital committed.
All right, so that brings me to just two final questions for you, and then we'll let you go. Obviously, the price of Bitcoin has taken a huge hit. Everyone is always trying to guess what the mining cost of a Bitcoin is. People were saying it was $8,000. That's why it can't drop below 8. I said that's ridiculous. then they said it was $6,000, and now they all seem to have disappeared and no one is guessing anymore, right? So obviously we're seeing that hash rate is starting to drop a little bit. I'm pretty sure everyone is taking a little bit of a hit on the sales. What do you think? I know you guys are just manufacturing equipment. What do you think a realistic floor is before it starts to get dangerous for not only the mining manufacturers like yourself, but also the mining operations? What do you think the realistic floor is that if we stay at that floor longer than 3 months, the whole system becomes in a little bit of jeopardy?
Okay, so there are various tranches of the customer base, and let's say prior to the crash, I would have customers that could have power as expensive as, let's say, 8 to 10 cents, fully loaded, fully wrapped. And so that was kind of like, if Bitcoin was at 10,000, they were okay. But the next bump of customers had, let's say, costs that were around 6,000. So as the price went down, those guys who, like the small number who were, let's say 6 to 10 cent power, they dropped out, they folded up, they switched, but they were pretty small in number. There's a big pile in the 5 to 6 cent range for power. So you could think of that might translate into the 5,000 to 6,000, a cost of building a Bitcoin or manufacturing a Bitcoin. Those guys then, as it goes below 6,000, they start to suffer. And you might actually look at the peak in hash rate, like I think was up around 50 E, dropping to 40. That percentage of the market might be the market that was at the, like the 5 to 6,000. But there's a whole host of people who have 1 cent power, 2 cent power, 2.5 cent, 3 cent, 4 cent, and they're good, as long as it's above 3,000. There are obviously niche players who have even cheaper power than 1 cent. It's very hard to estimate how many there are. But basically what happens is those guys end up gobbling up used machines. They drive the demand for the new machines. And the other thing that happens is we see some niche markets where people are doing things like selling the heat. So they held a seat, they sell the heat to grow farms. They sell the heat as district heating. For example, there's like guys in Northern Europe who are looking at that. So it gets harder and harder for me to tell where the cost is in terms of Bitcoin production, because guys are being so creative in how they manage their OpEx, and then how they make money in addition to making money with Bitcoin. So I hope that helped. I'll tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
There are other exciting things, where some people are actually generating their own power. And so they have ridiculously low costs. And then they also have the option to sell that power as power. So you see vertical integration going on. Anytime you go through one of these things, there's going to be margin compression and there's going to be vertical integration. And there are going to be guys who figure out a way to mine Bitcoin, let's say excess wind power in Texas. Circumstances where you are paid to take the power because there's too much power for the grid and they have to put it somewhere.
Yeah. So quick follow-up. You mentioned a lot of people are starting to generate their own power. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the hunt for Bitcoin starting to revolutionize some of the renewable energy concepts, and do you think in the future Bitcoin will be instrumental in getting the world off of fossil fuels for more renewable sources? Because if you can cheaply gather energy and innovate in a renewable energy source, your best use case for that energy is mining Bitcoin.
Yeah. So if you're in a circumstance where, let's say you're doing wind and solar, and you are generating excess power, and you have no place to put it, you can send it to a buffer. And if you're, let's say you're a power company who is forward thinking, you will look at that and say, hey, we have all this land. Nobody else wants to build on it because we're a utility and we have power lines and shit on the land. So let's build a Bitcoin farm. And when we have excess power from solar, when we have excess power from wind and no one to buy it, we can mine with it. So I don't think that will happen overnight, but it's definitely, let's say, like an architecture and infrastructure where you're basically, Bitcoin is helping you with renewable.
Gotcha. And yeah, so also I just want to comment that I did speak to some people that are mining in some crazy locations, and they have unreasonably cheap electricity, and their problem is getting the equipment, because these are usually countries where, let's not name them, but it's usually very, very interesting out there. All right, my last question. What are your thoughts on the decentralization or centralization of mining? A lot of people seem to accuse Bitcoin of having mining centralization, which is kind of ridiculous because it's 1,000 times more decentralized than any alternative crypto. But I don't even think that mining is centralized, and it never was. You guys are one of the biggest equipment sellers. What are your views on the accusations that Bitcoin mining is centralized?
I went through the claims, and I couldn't substantiate them. The closest I came to it was, looking at information from years ago about pool centralization. And so that I would think would be the real issue. Is there anyone who's in control of enough hash rate, at a pool level to do some damage? And I just don't see the evidence of that. On the ASIC manufacturing front, there's still a vibrant competition. Nobody talks about Bitfury and what Bitfury is doing. They're still a player and a strong player. There will be some centralization of mining power, but the playing field has definitely been leveled outside China. If Trump would remove the tariffs, it would be even better. Because right now the tariffs make it hard to expand in the U.S., not in Canada, but in the U.S. But in terms of where the hash power is and who controls it, I don't see any centralization threat from ASICs, and I've never understood that. ASICs don't cause central. People having huge cost advantage drives centralization. Well, the power prices are going up in China. Guys are moving machines out of China. I've pushed for geographic diversification in customers, and we're seeing that customers all over the world. So, I don't see the threat. And I'm in the middle of it.
All right, gotcha. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that update. All right, so we're gonna let you go, but before we let you go, tell us, I guess, a few more words about Canaan, and what is the latest miner selling, and what do you guys have on the research and development side? and what's coming out soon.
Okay, so we just sold out our 7-nanometer product, and so we're focused on selling out the Avalon 8 series, the 851. We put that on sale to move it. In terms of the future and research and development, my big focus over the past 6 months has been on industrial scale type solutions. Immersion cooling with Novec. Some products that can work as heaters and as miners. So that's in the pipeline. And then going forward, products that will be more upgradable. So instead of always having to buy like a individual miner, of looking at solutions where you can swap things out. So those are all under investigation. And I think 2019 will be real interesting.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'm really looking forward to something that's swappable without having a giant miner needing to be mailed to your house, because I definitely dealt with that. All right, Steve, thank you so much. I have the right contact to you now, and we'll try to have you on again on the show every now and then to get an update on the latest in ASICs and mining. I do want to slightly add, so Avalon is credited as being the first ASIC chip, but as far as I understand it, BitFury developed it completely independently, and almost within like a week or weeks, it's like, and it happens often, like technology just comes about where multiple people from different sides of the world come up with the same breakthrough literally within days apart. And I think that if Satoshi didn't solve proof of work, somebody else would have within a year.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to work in GPUs. I did the first 3D graphics chips on PCs. And one day I was sitting at work, and this kid showed me this Bitcoin stuff. It was like 2011, 2012. And it was FPGA, and I looked at it and I said, I had to quit my job and go build an ASIC to do this Bitcoin stuff. And then it's just one of those thoughts. And then I didn't. And then 2013 was the year. Then so yeah, like people, like you see the opportunity, and if you're working chips, you see the opportunity. So yeah, there's always that kind of confluence. Like I found that working in Silicon Valley, smart people all over the world looking at the same problem. We'll 2 or 3 of them will come up with the same idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will put links to Canaan down below. I'm not sure if you have a Twitter. If you do, text it over to me. I'll add it to the video description. It's not there yet. Kind of got this interview going last minute because we are here at Blokforge that are resellers of your product, the Avalon miners by Canaan. Thanks a lot, Steve. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Tom. All right. Bye.
All right, guys. So that was, let me, there we go. That, okay, here we go. All right. I hope you guys found it interesting, because mining is a big question on everybody's minds about what's going on with mining, and now that the price of Bitcoin has dropped. By the way, anybody here like camera shy? If you are, you may want to go to that side of the room. I'm going to tilt the camera this way, and if anyone is here that's like that likes to preserve their anonymity, we got chairs here on the side. You guys can also move up a little bit. I'll turn the camera towards the audience, and I will also. Yeah. Boom. And there's thank you for coming out, everyone. And I'm going to grab a chair. I'm going to go right in the middle. I'm going to grab the microphone over as well. at least bring that over to this side. And we'll do some Q&A. I can talk a little bit about my thoughts on mining, even though I'm certainly not an expert. Microphone's there. Let me grab a chair. All right. I'll sit here and make sure I'm kind of in the shot, and just grab the microphone over. All right, I can't see the live chat, guys, because I'm on this side, so we'll do it this way. All right. I can talk a little bit about any topic you guys like. Also, Nick, Blokforge, you want to come up, say a few words? What you guys do?
Yes. All right, so we're Blokforge. We're the largest distribution point, mainly for Canaan miners in the US. And we do sell to other countries. Our core business started 15 years ago. We manufacture parts for automotive aftermarket, suspension brakes, do some electronic stuff with vehicles, contract work for medical, military, things of that nature. So about 2.5 years ago, we purchased this place, and it required us to use a lot of power consumption in order to appease the city for certain economic development programs. So in a search of how to suck up a lot of power, we discovered the whole Bitcoin mining industry. So we started what we already did was the distribution of products. So we figured we'd mush the two together. There wasn't really any solid distribution point outside of China for any of this stuff. So we began the company a little over 2 years ago. That's what we
Very
do.
cool. Yeah, if I put the camera over there, you guys got some cool cars there in the back that you guys are working on.
Yeah, those are either personal cars of someone here, or they're cars we get, strip apart, develop products for.
And I'm learning other stuff about this space. Apparently, this is the #1 spot for paranormal activity in Arizona. So you guys got like ghost hunters and people coming through. We met some earlier. Are they still here? I wanted to interview them. This would have been interesting.
It took off. Yeah, we're one of the top 5 haunted in Arizona. And there was an episode on Travel Channel, Haunted America, I think it was, a couple weeks ago, and I think there's one in the fall for Ghost Adventures. So.
And they're covering your.
Yeah, they covered the building here. There's been a lot of. It's been here since the 20s. We bought it about 5 years ago, and a couple years to renovate. So it's a lot of strange happenings around here. Even there was about 5 or 6 deaths that even since I've been here, just a couple of years.
Like
it's
where?
a little odd. It's probably not normal for most businesses.
Like right in this area?
Oh, right outside.
Oh God.
Yeah, the ones in the building were before we were here. So.
Got it. All right, well, that's good.
It's
That's all right. You
good
guys
place.
are you guys are also selling Bitmain miners, so that could be considered as a death soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what have you seen in like the whole mining space? I guess we're just gonna have like a little bit of a mining theme, and then we'll still have like a lot of time for Q&A. So obviously with the drop in hash rate, it's obvious that sales are probably down a little bit, but you guys are still fans of Bitcoin and haven't lost faith yet, right?
Yeah, we accept. I'd say probably 80% Bitcoin. Not through conversion. It's through us. It's not something. We don't use BitPay. We're converted to US dollars. Do it when we need to, if we have to. So it's the core driver of the business, and good and bad, I guess. I can say the past year better if we anticipated drops a little earlier, but it is what it is. If we're in the business, we're 100% in it. So that's part of the whole ecosystem, because we're collecting Bitcoin. We give employees Bitcoin for bonuses. All right. Yeah, so with the ecosystem, we're collecting 80% of the money with Bitcoin. We're giving employee bonuses with Bitcoin. We pay vendors with Bitcoin. So it's a complete cycle for us. So it's not ever a fiat conversion unless it's regular bills, but there's also a percentage of the income that is just already in dollars we use for that function.
All right, so our last question is, do you guys sell equipment that mines things other than Bitcoin, like mining Ethereum or Litecoin or any ASIC that mine other coins?
Yes and no. We offer them, and I would say maybe 4 to 5% of the annual sales of that. There might be with every new coin created, there's always that initial spike until the whole flood hits the network, and then it becomes unprofitable in a couple of weeks. So it's not a long-term product.
And you've been in this space for a while now, right? So what do you think is the future of altcoins? Because I've always said that putting research and development into mining and ASIC mining of altcoins is crazy because they're all fungible with each other. So investing in continuous upgrades of your mining equipment of altcoins is insane. And the coins that refuse to go the ASIC route, well, then they're kind of stuck on GPU mining, which is also kind of crazy. Like there's no advancement in technology. And at the end of the day, all of these coins are competing for the same electricity bill. So why are you gonna invest in a big mining farm of an old coin that may not survive? They literally become paperweights, where, as we can see from Bitcoin mining now, you can still resell your old equipment, no matter how old your miners are. If you can get them into Venezuela, they will buy them from you because they have zero cost of electricity. And there are other places. So what do you think is the viability of old coins into the future? Because I think there isn't it. From just a mining perspective.
From a mining perspective, it's some of those coins seem like they're almost developed only to be mineable, profitable, dump on the market. There's no
For the
other
short
purpose.
term.
Yeah, for the short term, the day. There's no other point besides that. And it seems like some of the manufacturers, when the market's good, they'll take their slush money, develop some ASICs, try to get a good chunk of cash out of this one batch, and then the network is destroyed for that coin. Everybody cashes out, and that's the end of it. And some of the coin developers getting into the manufacturing space, having a great competition with other manufacturers, forking off and bricking this and bricking that. And it's very risky business getting too much into any of those altcoins, especially with big hardware investments.
All right, very cool. Anything else you want to add before we go to the audience Q&A? And thank you again for hosting us here at Blokforge for the Bitcoin Meetup.
That's it. Thank you, Tom.
All right, thanks, man. All right. Cool. All right, I'll try to repeat your questions, guys. Please remind me to repeat your questions. Let's just open the floor. We're here another hour. A little bit of food in the back. We got drinks, and let's do it. Anybody got a question for me?
Excuse my green energy ignorance for this question, but I'm just kind of thinking about the whole Venezuela thing. What you're saying about why don't they mine there if they got free electricity and stuff. But why we have all this land, we have solar panels. Why aren't there just insane investments into just giant solar panel mining farms where because the use of solar energy is essentially free, right? It's enough.
So the question is, why aren't we using more solar energy?
Yeah.
Well, because solar energy isn't necessarily cheaper than other forms of energy. It's starting to get better, and usually when the price of oil rises, you see a lot more usage in solar power and a lot more development in solar power. It's not necessarily cheaper. It also depends on location. And those solar panels, they do need to be replaced. So there is a cost of those solar panels. Again, I'm not an energy expert, but if solar energy was that cheap and that free, everybody would be using it all around the world. So it's not that advantageous yet. But my point is that because of Bitcoin, because you have a direct incentive, hey, if I make solar energy cheaper, I don't even have to tell anyone. I don't have to run around the world convincing people that I've solved the problem. I can just solve it and mine Bitcoin. So I think the Bitcoin will now create this incentive, and maybe it already has. We don't know. Maybe someone has developed a significantly cheaper solar technology of gathering that electricity and is like mining Bitcoin on the side. And this is what we mean when we say we have no idea who's actually mining Bitcoin, who has innovated. And like all technology, just like ASICs were developed by two completely separate people at different sides of the world within weeks of each other, it's the same thing here. If someone did solve the solar energy gathering problem on the cheap, and they have been doing it, or they're about to start doing it for like a few years, someone else will solve the same problem. Either, you know, someone will see that patent and they'll just like slightly tweak it, or they'll just, you know, do the same thing that's in the patent and wait to get sued. It's going to get out. The technology is going to get out. So once it becomes profitable, it'll be great. For now, it's probably not great. You know, you can still, some parts of the country, even like drove to Staten Island, different parts of Staten Island the other day, and I'm like, this massive field of solar panels. And I'm like, I have no idea where that power is going. I have no idea what they're doing with it. But I'm glad I see it, because I would love to have more solar power and other forms of energy. Geothermal is going to be amazing. I'm surprised there aren't more mining in Iceland. They're very good at geothermal. We'll see. But yeah, I'm expecting huge advancements in renewable energy, and Bitcoin is a key. All right, question right there.
Do you think the change the new protocols within the Whipple need? There's another one coming out.
So Mimblewimble is an interesting one. So the question is about Mimblewimble. The problem with Mimblewimble is that it's a different protocol to Bitcoin. So Mimblewimble is a code. It's a different code. Basically, to me, Mimblewimble is a lot closer to Monero than it is to Bitcoin, because it requires either a full hard fork of Bitcoin, which we know can't happen because it will be contentious, or it requires a whole new altcoin, which is what Beam is doing and what Grin is doing or done. I forget. Yeah, so they're both launching again within weeks of each other. Happens, right? Yeah, so I'm sure there will be many, right? Because anybody want to jump on it. But the whole thing is, Mimblewimble is not really a solution for Bitcoin, from a simple fact that it either requires a hard fork or a new coin. So it's a lot closer to Monero, it's closer to Bcash, it's closer to, it is an altcoin. The only other option, maybe if someone, I mean, again, I'm not a straight up developer, is to somehow implement that technology on a side chain of Bitcoin, so you don't need your own coin to have it. Kind of like what, I guess, well, yeah, kind of like Liquid, but Liquid is literally using Bitcoin. This would be like a peg to Bitcoin. So it'll be a coin that's pegged to Bitcoin, that's convertible back and forth from Bitcoin, kind of like what Rootstock is trying to do. They're trying to create like another coin, but that's pegged to Bitcoin. So it's like you lock up your Bitcoin within, again, I don't want to speak about Rootstock, right? But I've seen it up in their presentation. It's like you lock up a Bitcoin in their side chain, and then you get X amount of another coin, but it's equivalent to the Bitcoin. And then if you ever want to go back to Bitcoin, you can just convert it back and go back into Bitcoin. So you're not creating another coin, you're creating a direct peg to Bitcoin and something like that. Like a Bitcoin is getting locked up for that. So maybe Mimblewimble can be used in that form, right? But the point of Mimblewimble is to give you privacy. Yes, and there is a way of doing that on Bitcoin itself without going through this complicated process of a completely different code base. Schnorr gives you a lot more privacy, confidential transactions, and like and bulletproofs, and Lightning channels themselves can be significantly more private. You can also have privacy that's like wallet-based, front-end based. Well, let's just say that it's a bit of an overkill. Yes, we all want perfect 100% privacy, but if 80 or 90% as good privacy solves 99% of the problems, then you don't need to go that, there's no need to go that extra mile that could potentially be dangerous and split the community again. So I don't really care that much for Mimblewimble. I think we're gonna solve the fungibility problem on Bitcoin itself without that code base. All right, next. Yes. Oh, you want to come up and like maybe speak up so that I don't have to fully repeat the question?
Consensus protocols as they relate to proof of work, because like the first stake, you can just get rid of all that dumb mining. You can just like.
Well, right. Proof of stake. But what's your definition of better, right? So the question is about proof of stake and proof of staking rid of mining. I agree. Proof of staking rid of mining, but mining is the innovation, right? Mining is so. You can go back. I think the best way to understand why proof of stake is no good is to go and read email conversations from like early 2000s. I have one of them I have a screenshot in my presentation that I'm going to do in Vegas at Unconfiscatable. Anybody going to that, by the way? Anybody coming to Vegas? Okay, we got one. So like the double spending problem, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about so when you say proof of stake can solve it, we're saying that proof of stake is going to solve the double spend problem. And there was lots of discussions of cypherpunks, how Finney and lots of other people were trying to solve the double spend problem in forever. And proof of stake was an option 10 years ago. Before Satoshi, actually, Bitcoin's been around 20 years ago now. I still think I'm young. 20 years ago now, proof of stake was always an option, but it wasn't solving the problem because it requires a lot more trust and proof, and that's the big difference. And one of these email conversations I have it's basically Peter Todd, and he's like, saying how he's been thinking about the problem, and he's talking about like signatures and how to solve double spending, and he's talking about proof of work, like trying to create proof of work. And then at the end of the email, it basically says like a bunch of bleeps, like a bunch of like he actually put like characters instead of saying the word shit or the word fuck, and then he says like a bunch of characters and then double spend twice problem again. And Peter Todd was, I think, 14 years old or something, and still in high school. Something like that, right? So, like, very smart people have been trying to solve this problem forever. And proof of work is how you solve it. Proof of stake is not innovative at all, and it will devolve to a single entity requiring trust. And that's what people knew back then, and why proof of work with mining and what Satoshi did is the innovation. Going to proof of stake is actually going backwards, not forward.
Yeah, it gets very complex. And I feel like a lot of that early stuff, like all the discussions that like founders had in the beginning, they get lost now. And then people are, like with Ethereum, they're all about proof of stake, right? And there's like conversations on Twitter, and people they'll try and like have some kind of discussion about it. But I feel like like it's not something you can even have over Twitter, right? It's like very complex.
Yeah. So I mean, how many of you have heard this? If you're on Twitter or if you're in enough group chats, people like to quote the following line from Satoshi. He said this line back in, I think, late 2010 or mid 2010, where he said, if you don't understand it or still don't get it, I no longer have the time to explain it to you. Anybody run across that? Anybody know who Satoshi said that to? You all know who that is.
Larimer.
Larimer. He said that to Dan Larimer, the creator of delegated proof of stake. Like, that's who he said that to, right? Because people just got tired of explaining why proof of stake just doesn't work. Now, the discussion surrounded other things, not necessarily the proof of stake angle of it, but that's the person that ended up creating delegated proof of stake. And delegated proof of stake is just a centralized version of proof of stake where you have 21 people deciding everything, because it's like, well, proof of stake is no good, and it's done just as well with 21 people. And then someone else will say, well, it's done just as well with 18 people, and then 15 people. And then eventually, well, Google will decide, right? I mean, that's what it will break down into. That's what it. So I'm not a believer in proof of stake. To me, it's not a blockchain. To me, a blockchain actually requires proof of work. All right. Anybody else? Well, no. Well, the story. You know what? Nobody knows what Ethereum is going to be. They never actually had a plan. And they still don't know. Like, nobody does. It's just a prototype of doing stuff on a database to avoid regulation, but everyone that's doing it is a centralized entity. So either regulation is coming into Ethereum, or all of these things are going to get off Ethereum and be regulated. Like, there's decentralization is a tool to prevent censorship. I think it'll be around in value transfer and money forever now, because people have gotten a taste of it. Once you get the taste of censorship-resistant value transfer, decentralized value transfer, that genie is not going back into the bottle. But an ICO with a centralized entity staying decentralized, that's not going to happen.
After the balancing, so its immutability was lost, and then the price exploded.
Yes.
So
right, but it exploded because
it's almost like, how did that happen?
It happened because of the ICOs. It happened because companies went.
Yeah, because Ethereum was mutable.
Well, no, but they didn't care, right? I mean, like nobody cares if it. Actually, it was good for them, right? The fact that it's mutable. Hey, if my ICO is big enough and enough prominent people lose money and I get hacked, you know, they can recover, right? So in effect, if you're launching on top of Ethereum and you're not a decentralized entity, right? Like, it's a chicken and the egg problem, right?
Like, I thought that most people would think like you and I, but they
Oh yeah, no, I was clearly wrong.
Immutability, they wanted their money back in the day.
Right. So again, look at it from a perspective of a person selling an ICO. They want to sell it in a decentralized way to avoid regulation, and they're all hoping they're not going to be the ones that are made an example of. And the other problem is you can't grow too big. I mean, look at Shapeshift, right? They grew too big, and if you read that. You know, the Medium piece by Eric Voorhees is basically saying, well, we grew too big. We had no choice but to comply with regulators. And once we started complying with regulators, we lost a lot of business. And they went to the smaller competitors that aren't working with regulators until they get too big. And then they will have to work with it. So you're not going anywhere. Like the decentralized, you know, screw the government and regulatory nature does not work with a company, but it works with Bitcoin. And this is why it can't work with Ethereum, because even if Ethereum manages to stay decentralized, anything built on top of it will eventually leave Ethereum and be on another regulated database. Because if your company on top of Ethereum grows way too big, I mean, I'm not even saying if you grew big enough to catch the eye of the securities regulators. Imagine if you built some kind of critical infrastructure, like this train is running on top of the Ethereum blockchain. Like eventually a regulator is gonna hire the right advisor or the right consultant, and the consultant is gonna say, yeah, you can't have that because the next time somebody launches CryptoKitties and the blockchain grinds to a halt, the train's gonna crash. So if you grow too big on top of Ethereum, you have to get off Ethereum. And I don't think we're going to get to that because I don't think it's stable enough for that, to even get that far, right? But even if it did. And this is what people don't understand, that you're not going to decentralize the world because you can't put critical infrastructure on top of it. Maybe Bitcoin blockchain can get to a point where you can put other digital assets on top of it, right? Like, is the Bitcoin blockchain capable of decentralizing the stock market, let's say, and get to that future of color coins, which was the original project, where, hey, we can take one Bitcoin, we can subdivide it to 100 million Satoshis. That means a company like Apple can issue 100 million shares of Apple stock, where each share of Apple stock is assigned to one Satoshi, where one Satoshi has almost no financial value, but a share of Apple stock is $100. So the value of Apple stock, what determines the value of that Satoshi? And now people are trading Apple stock on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. Will we get there one day? Maybe in 40, 50 years, when the computer science community have all come to the consensus that the Bitcoin blockchain is not just going to disappear. It's not just going to grind to a halt when that technology is thoroughly trusted. And this concept of being on top of Ethereum is dubious at best, because I don't think they're going to last another 5 years. But I could be wrong there, but I don't think they're going to last another 5 years. But I do expect Bitcoin to last another 20, 30, 50, hopefully 100 plus years. And then we can have these kinds of discussions. For example, a lot of our infrastructure depends on the internet, but not too much. Like if the internet goes down for a long period of time, we have a lot of problems. But not all critical structure. Like I'm pretty sure that the nuclear energy reactors don't depend on the internet, right? Because they can't afford that. So they got their own internal stuff. So a lot of I'm sure again, airplanes and some of like your car doesn't depend on the internet, right? We'll see what happens with Tesla, right? Again, it's the same battle. Internet's been with us for what, 30, 40 years now. We all trust it. I don't know how many of you would have gotten to this meeting if it wasn't for your GPS, right? Imagine if the internet went down on your way to Blokforge. Are you going to get here? Probably not, right? So you're dependent on it, right? But you don't want like your car to just stop in the middle of a highway going 60 miles an hour. So how much critical infrastructure can you put on the internet? And then the question is, how much critical infrastructure can you put on a blockchain? And then which blockchain? Obviously, you have to go with the safest one, the one that's not going to grind to a halt. So even though your Tesla is somewhat dependent on the internet, it has to have a real fail-safe. Like what happens if the internet stops working? Like your Tesla can't just stop at 60 miles an hour to a dead stop. And the Ethereum people, I don't think they think about this stuff at all, like at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't have built it. So I don't know what they're doing. All right, next. No, you good?
Because Bitcoin is deflationary and people generally hoard what rises in value, right? Like they don't want to spend gold. Well, anyway, but because people don't want to spend what rises in value, what do you think the future, like 15 years from now, our currency will transact at? Because generally people spend what's worthless. They spend fiat and hoard their Bitcoin because that could possibly go up. So based on that principle, do you think that, it's because Bitcoin acts as a store of value, people aren't going to really want to spend it? So do you view it as more of a digital gold, or do you think we'll get to the point where it's an actual currency? I mean, like a currency that people transact, or both?
Well, no, I mean, it's an actual currency, right? We all know that the US dollar is the best store of value amongst fiat currencies. That's obvious, right? So how come all of us aren't like hoarding US dollars, right? So eventually you're making money in that currency. I'm one of the few people that, I need Bitcoin. I have to spend Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what the price of Bitcoin. Now, I splurge a little more when the price of Bitcoin is higher and splurge less when the price of Bitcoin is lower. But then it's the opposite of what people say about deflationary currencies, right? When the price of Bitcoin goes up, you want to spend more. You want to buy that Lambo like some people did, right? Some people bought stuff at the high price of Bitcoin. They're very, very happy. So this concept that you're not going to spend your deflationary currency, most of the time, 90% of the time, you're not spending it on things you shouldn't be buying anyway. And anytime you have to spend it, you're going to spend it. Like if your car breaks down, you're not going to wait. You're going to immediately go and get it done. You're going to, anything, right? I mean, our electronics constantly deflate and we're still constantly buying new electronics. I mean, Apple will sell that new cell phone for $1,000 and people are still going to line up for it. So this concept of deflationary currency is bad is really not true. I think Saifedean explained it very well in his book, The Bitcoin Standard, when he talked about high time preference and low time preference. And even if we don't go that deep into it, the ability to save money and not spend it on things you probably don't need will allow you to do more things with that money after it goes up in value. It'll allow you to quit that job and maybe start a business and employ people. So it's not a bad thing. And I think economists, a lot of them just get that wrong, that you have to stimulate spending. And the same goes for the Bcash people.
But don't you think government, I'm totally with you. I agree. Deflationary is beautiful. You save your money. But like you have economists that believe that you should spend, because that heats up your economy, right? I mean, the more spending that people do, I mean, if you're, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But yeah, just that, don't you think the governments are generally for, inflationary currency? So don't you think
Well, of course they are. The governments are.
pushing, inflationary currencies that people will spend?
Oh, no, of course, the governments always have. This is why governments and their economic advisors continue to laugh at Bitcoin, and they've always laughed at deflationary currencies, and they'll continue to do so. And we'll see what happens. I like this concept of Bitcoin being a deflationary currency, but there'll always be inflationary currencies all around us. And we got a long way to go. I would love to watch this economic experiment of Bitcoin being this deflationary currency. But again, we have lots of inflation in the crypto space. Every single altcoin is inflation on top of Bitcoin. So it's hard to say that the crypto is deflationary because you have Litecoin and you have Monero and you have Ethereum and you have, God forbid, Ripple still around, right? You have all of these inflationary currencies and anyone can start their own tomorrow. And this is another reason why I expect Bitcoin to rise and everything else to fall, because everything else is simply inflation on top of Bitcoin, no different than the US dollar. The Litecoin to me is not much different than the US dollar. It is, Bitcoin is deflationary currency. And that's it. We have 21 million of them. And everything else is just different currencies inflation. So Litecoin is way closer to being USD than Bitcoin is being fiat. Or sorry, Litecoin is closer to being US dollars than Litecoin is being Bitcoin. Sorry, man. Yes.
So I've noticed that often when you go to pull up a chart on like a traditional asset like gold, whatnot, you'll tend to pull up futures. Is there a reason you tend to look at the futures charts instead of the underlying asset?
Well, that's because that's a very good question. And the question is, how come I always pull up the futures chart of gold instead of the underlying price of gold? but the underlying price of gold is actually determined by the futures. So the futures is the price discovery of gold. This is also why I tend not to pull up BitMax price of Bitcoin, which is the futures price of Bitcoin, but I do pull up Bitstamp price of Bitcoin, because Bitstamp determines the price discovery of, it's actually a very good question. It's what is determining the price discovery. People are actually exchanging Bitcoin for fiat money on Bitstamp. On futures in Bitcoin, no, that's not what's happening. It's a speculation on the future price. Now, in gold futures, I specifically pull up the nearest contract. So there's multiple contracts of gold. The nearest contract is the expiration of the nearest month. And that is the true price discovery of the price of gold. And the spot price is pretty much determined from that. And this is why I don't pull up, the expected price of gold on January 2020. And that would be a futures contract that's a year away. And that price is substantially different than the current price of gold. Now, on the other side of that, we have the S&P 500 and the futures on the S&P 500. I tend to pull them both up, but the difference is the futures of the S&P 500 trade outside of market hours. So they give you that speculation on the stock market, let's say at 8 p.m. or at 7 a.m. or at 8 a.m. Once the stock market starts trading, I don't really care about the futures price of S&P 500. I care about the actual S&P 500. Now, I can't trade the S&P 500. There's no option for that, because the S&P 500 is an index determined by 500 stocks being traded up and down. The closest I can get to trading the S&P 500 is the S&P 500 ETF, which is also determined from those stocks. So this is where it gets a little strange, but it's very easy to trade the futures. So those that want to trade the S&P 500, the simplest way and probably the most dangerous way is to trade the S&P 500 futures, because they are leveraged 50 to 1 on the mini future contract and 250 to 1 on the actual S&P future. So very few professionals even trade the full S&P future because it's 250x leverage to the. So I always go with the closest to price discovery. And in the case of gold, they're so close that it doesn't really matter. Though I guess you can say the same thing for the price of Bitcoin versus on BitMax futures versus the Bitcoin underlying index. But there is liquidity so small that things randomly spike. Good question, though. Next. We have about 30 minutes, or we can just cut the video. We'll call it a day and just hang out here. Grab a drink and talk around. Yeah, one more question.
I have a question on the price of Bitcoin, because altcoins right now are people still trading like crazy, have this fantasy, but we didn't capitulate, because it seems like altcoins are going to be around for a long time. How is that? It's like Bitcoin needs, well, not for a long time, but for a while. So do you think the next bull run is going to get? It seems like there's going to be one more bull run before it goes down.
Well, we all agree that Bitcoin is going to have another bull run. I hope. That's why we're all here. But I don't know if altcoins are going to have another bull run. I'm skeptical that altcoins are going to have another bull run, because I'm trying to call the bear market in Bitcoin when Bitcoin starts to separate from the altcoins. And I'm lumping all the altcoins together. Like, to me, Ethereum and Litecoin are pretty much as useless as, I don't know, something that's number 100 on CoinMarketCap.
it just seems like the altcoins won't die. They're just sticking around. And because of that, Bitcoin seems like it needs to go a lot further.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but also, you know, penny stocks don't die either. They're still around, but they're irrelevant, right? I mean, how many of you trade penny stocks? How many of you know I mean, I know it's hard, right? Like if I ask the question in because I actually looked it up, right? I looked it up for 2017. In 2017, like throughout the year of 2017, what do you think the biggest gain was for a stock, a publicly traded stock that you could have traded on E-Trade? I think a little less than that. It was 500 because you had to get lucky from January 1st to January 1st, right? There were spurts where things went up thousands of %, right? But for the whole year, the biggest gainer was a 500% gain in 1 year. And that was a stock nobody heard of because it went from about 50 cents to about $2.50, just straight up year to year, right? So there's lots of stuff that goes up by percentage, but does it last? And I don't expect any of that stuff to last. So yeah. There was that one stock that I was looking at every now and then. People were asking me that went to like $300 from like $1, and yeah. So a lot of that stuff is going up, and that was a good sector, and that sector might do well going forward. We'll find out. But so things bubble up, but the thing is it sustainable? And these aren't companies. I mean, to me, they're companies. If it's not Bitcoin, it's probably a company. So it doesn't belong in this bucket. It belongs on the stock market. It belongs on the New York Stock Exchange. It belongs on NASDAQ. And none of them are, right? Again, we just like Bitmain is trying to go public. They had a viable business. Canaan is trying to go public. They still have a viable business. And they're struggling to get that approval to go public. I think they will eventually. I think at the next bull run, they should be able to pull off going public because mining Bitcoin isn't going anywhere. It's just not. Somebody will always mine it. In fact, now that the price of Bitcoin is so low and hash power is going down, I am more interested in mining Bitcoin than I was before. And the reason is because I was always willing to mine Bitcoin at a loss. And my electric bill is going to be the same. My electric bill, I was willing to mine to help support the ecosystem. And my electric bill was the same at $20,000 price of Bitcoin as it is here. But I'm mining to help even myself, process Bitcoin transactions. So my motivation for mining is slightly different than someone with a profit motive, which is why I don't expect Bitcoin mining to go away. On the other hand, mining of altcoins is way more profit motive than mining Bitcoin, which is another case against altcoins and a case for Bitcoin. Which is why maybe they'll pump one more time at the next bubble, but maybe they won't. Because maybe people will wise up and they'll just realize how useless they are. And regulation will be a lot stricter. Like it's so hard. Like even a new proof of work coin, I think is in serious trouble because in order to launch a proof of work coin, you need a business and you need, you saw the debate. How many of you saw the debate over Raven coin that we did on my YouTube channel?
Secure in the first few years, so to have enough miners.
Right, and like again, we can look at Zcash, and I mean, like all of these new altcoins that are coming online, they're really not. They're not an operator. They're not like some guy in the basement like Charlie Lee. Like one guy launched a coin, and it was easy back then. To launch a coin today, you need a giant operation. You need a marketing team. You need an office. You need investors. You need lawyers. You're literally running a company. Look at Zcash. I'm sure Ravencoin's got some very similar to that. That one's a little bit smaller. And look at all of them, right? even like the Beam and Grin, I mean, they're marketing teams and web developers. And again, it's like a whole, you got to have a corporate structure to launch these things. And if you have a corporate structure, that means regulators have a door to knock on. Like, it just doesn't work anymore. And they're better off structuring this companies. Like, I don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's like silly. I mean, why would you want to put yourself at risk? I'm sorry, no one is going to see the creators of Grin as like a Julian Assange or an Edward Snowden or a Satoshi. I mean, like there's only one of those. It's always like the first guy that did X. Following that, like there's only one Ross Ulbricht, right? Ross Ulbricht gets 2 life sentences. The next guy that had a case almost identical as Ross Ulbricht got like 2 months. Like it's only the first guy that becomes the poster person. Everybody else is either irrelevant or gets in serious trouble and is still irrelevant. Like, there's only going to be one. Like, following in their footsteps is either going to be dangerous for you and your family. You know, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it.
I do disagree in the short that means that you have a little bit of money you want to teach.
That's not investing, that's trading. That's the difference, right? So my interview with Peter McCormick of what Bitcoin did, and him and I talked about this. Maybe I shouldn't steal it there, but check that out. We talked about that. Like, the more people, the more responsible you have to be. And you know, it's all fun and games, you know, having about the latest altcoin. But when you start being a face and you start speaking in public and people know who you are and they can hold you accountable, you now have to think twice about those statements. Again, hence my interview with Ronnie Mars. I tried explaining to him that do not promote anything other than Bitcoin. Maybe stick to the top 20 if you have some kind of a good case, but it's going to bite you. But he was way off the beaten path. And no matter what coin he chose, it didn't have to be DIG. It could have been any coin outside in that like 50, at number 50 market cap or below. No matter what he chose, if you tie your reputation to it and you had a reputation, you are in serious trouble, because now he's being sued by the DIG people. He's being potentially sued by his subscribers. Like, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And this is why.
You look like a parody wallet issue. Unbelievable. Like, I can't even believe that when I read that, when I first read that tweet that, you know, the dude whatever he did was just like,
That just happened on $1 billion trade. Like, really? Do you think he lost $30 million? And you know, we're recommending that for pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Do you think Bitcoin would have succeeded if Satoshi would have came out and we would have known who he was?
That is a very good question that no one has ever asked me before. So the question is, do I think Bitcoin would have succeeded if Satoshi came out and we knew who he was? I'm going to have to lean towards yes, because Bitcoin was just too revolutionary of a technology. It's like saying, would the internet had succeeded if we knew who the person was that invented it, right? Maybe it was Al Gore. I don't know. The Al Gore jokes eventually come out, right? Like look, well, let me put it to you this way. I mean, I don't know if we all know this, but like DARPA, which is a government sponsor, and like the government, you know, the CIA or whoever, right? The government created the internet, but it's still decentralized. We still use it. So I think that even if we knew who Satoshi was, it would still work. It would still be great. And if anyone followed him like a Monero with an anonymous creator, I think that still would have failed, because I think it would have worked. I don't, because the properties are still there and it was innovative. I think it's a better story that we don't know who it is. But as far as the usability and the function of Bitcoin, now he would have had to also somewhat walk away or admit, hey, we have a team of core developers right here, and goddamn, are they better developers than I am, right? Like, he would have to make people comfortable that he's not the controller of it. And I'm sure he would have, right? Because considering he wanted to, because if it would have been under control of one person, then it's not decentralized. So had we known who it was, I don't think it would have changed much.
But see, my thing is people always want a leader for
Yeah.
whatever organization, whatever ideal there is, they always look for a leader, right? And so I think it plays a huge role, in my personal opinion, in the success of Bitcoin that we don't know. Because number one, it makes it an ideal, it makes it a belief, and I think it just, ideals are like religion, and they spread, and people believe in them. And but mainly, I think people would have continued to stick to whatever his opinion was, and they would cling on to him rather than have this. I mean, what he did with being anonymous was like the epitome of decentralization. It was like sitting it out.
Yeah, no, it helped. But again, it would have been, I mean, I would compare it to something like WikiLeaks, which is not even decentralized. Is WikiLeaks still around? Anybody still, is it still?
That's probably
Right.
The servers are like in some very comfortable.
Right, but Julian Assange has been at the Ecuadorian embassy in London for what, 3 years now, 4 years? I'm surprised they haven't kicked him out yet. Like, he's literally sitting in an Ecuadorian embassy. I'm pretty sure he has zero communication with the WikiLeaks people because that is a huge risk. Sitting at he doesn't want to piss off the Ecuadorian government, to kick him out. So he walked away from WikiLeaks, and he has zero to do with it. It still functions as it was. It's just not as, I guess it's not as popular as it was before, but it was a big breakthrough. And even when he went away, so I just don't see how the concept, right? Because Satoshi would certainly be. It would have been more dangerous for Bitcoin. It might have hard forked a few times with, like, Satoshi wants one thing and the core developers are overruling him. And again, like, there's a couple of people, like Craig Wright is one person that claims to be Satoshi. There is another person that claims to be Satoshi, also working on the Bcash side of things, right? So,
Clearly advanced.
like,
Speed of Bitcoin, I would say, for him walking away, because he opened up incentives for
look,
everybody.
I'm a believer that the better technology and progresses. I know people always complain, like VHS versus, what was it, Betamax, or like that one's supposed to be the better one, and Blu-ray over HD is always a big debate. Yeah, and like, as far as I'm concerned, the only time technology has ever gone backwards was when the Concorde plane was eliminated, right? Like, and I think we have faster planes today. They're just not commercial, not for commercial use. So technology always goes forward. It's an interesting what if. It really is. I also had I think it still would have been fine. I actually got a little tip question. I'm gonna try to answer it because it was a good question, and then I guess we'll end it there. Still only have like 250 live viewers because I guess no one's getting notifications of the live stream. It's really weird. What do you think of the STO? God. And the alts that have government backing? Okay, so look. So the STO is just another name for the ICO. I don't see a difference between an ICO and an STO. The only difference between an ICO and an STO is that an STO decided to ask for some kind of permission first before launching their token. But that doesn't really matter because that token is still a security. In fact, an STO, literally the S stands for security. So you're launching a security token, and for some crazy reason, you are going to be launching it on an inferior, insecure database like an Ethereum, as opposed to actually launching a real security on a centralized platform. So I don't know who you're catering to. You may be catering to, 16, 17-year-old kids that can trade it in the secondary market fairly quickly. You're catering to exiting this thing early. Like, I don't see a point of an STO. To me, an STO is just another ICO, only with some regulatory structure, but it has the same technological risk. And I think eventually they're all going to be centralized on top of a secure, non-decentralized database, because it makes no sense. It just makes no sense. Maybe in the future it will make sense to put it on a Bitcoin side chain, but certainly you wouldn't want this stuff on the main chain because of data storage issues that Ethereum is learning about now. Yeah.
What is it that makes the options so attractive? Is it the ability to hedge?
Options as in like a trading instrument?
Yes.
Ooh, options are attractive to multiple people for different reasons. They were originally created as a hedging instrument, just like futures were originally created as a hedging instrument. So the original function of futures was, hey, I'm growing a bunch of corn, and I want to make sure that I have money to grow this corn, and I have a buyer of this corn in the future. So you sell the corn you are growing forward to someone that is going to buy that corn. Now, that person also takes a risk that you're going to screw up and not be able to grow that corn, and that contract's priced accordingly. And options allow you to hedge as well. One of the best hedging use cases for options, it's kind of like insurance. A put option is an insurance contract. It's, let's say, insurance on your Apple stock, where you buy an option, you pay a premium, you pay like an insurance premium, you pay a premium like, let's say, hey, I think Apple stock might crash over the next, in the next month. So you're scared and you're like, hey, I'm gonna go buy an insurance contract on Apple stock. I'm gonna pay, let's say, $1,000, and it's gonna insure me from my, I don't know, 100 options. You have 100 shares of Apple stock, that's like 100 grand. So you're like, hey, I can pay $1,000 and I can ensure that my Apple stock, if it falls more than 5%, I don't lose any more money the rest of the month. So you only have a 5% loss, and if it falls 50%, you only lost 5%, and you paid $1,000 premium for that. And if it doesn't happen, you lost your $1,000. So that's an example of a put contract, and that is a way to hedge. You can also do it in reverse. You can say, hey, I'm actually trying to profit from this stock falling, but it might rise. But the call contract is different. The call contract, again, a lot of people use call contract like, hey, I'm holding Apple stock at $100 a share, and I say, I really want to sell Apple stock at $102 a share, or $105 a share, let's say. If it goes to $105, I'm going to sell it. But I don't think Apple's going to go down. So instead of selling it at $105, when it gets there, hey, I'm going to sell a call contract, and I'm going to take a premium. So someone says, so I say, hey, if Apple stock goes above 105, you buy it from me for 105. So even if Apple goes up to 110, someone can buy it from you from 105. But I just collected some money. So if Apple only goes to 103, 104, the contract expired, but I made some money because you paid me to buy it at 105. It didn't make it to 105. You're not going to buy it from me for 105. So I just kept the money that you paid me to do that. So these are the hedging options. But I traded options for leverage and speculation because you can. But that's the hedging. So options were invented for hedging, just like futures were. But then, like, I'm not planning to buy any oil, but I can go and trade oil with futures. You know, I'm not going to take delivery of 1,000 barrels of oil in one oil contract. I'd probably get arrested if I tried, because the government is going to be wondering, what the hell am I doing with 1,000 barrels of oil? Which is why the exchange will not allow me to execute that contract. But I can surely speculate, use futures to speculate. And people speculate, and that's fine. They create liquidity and they create a fair market value. All right, good question. All right, guys. Let me get the camera back on myself. Thank you for coming to Phoenix. There we go. And hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. Hope like the audio and everything worked. I'm still like holding the mic. All right, guys. We didn't really talk about the price of Bitcoin much. I don't even know what the price of Bitcoin is. And but you get that enough on my YouTube channel. And we got a few more minutes here. We can just hang out and chat. Oh, I'm not even in the video. And thank you so much for watching on a live stream. And we're gonna call it a day. Unconfiscatable and the workshop tomorrow as well. So there probably won't be a live stream tomorrow. There will be for people that register for future workshops because I'm going to stream the introduction to trading for them. But anyway, you guys will get an email. Talk to you all on the next one. Thank you, Phoenix. And Blokforge for hosting.